Hey guys, it's Luke Yan, and today I am going to be doing my next 2023 reading wrap-up, and I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in October and November. So the reason why I'm combining October and November is for two reasons. One, I would have only been able to film my October wrap-up during Thanksgiving, and secondly, I only read like one long series in November, and it was a reread, so I didn't think it deserved like its own video, if that makes any sense. But I do have quite a few books to discuss right now, so let's get on into the wrap-up. The first book that I read in October was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. I believe I read this book in the past. Well, okay, I'm not sure to this day if I had read like a children's version of it or the actual version, because I remember my second grade teacher reading us The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but I don't remember if it was the kids' version or this actual version, so I decided to read the actual version, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it like 3 out of 5 stars, 3 stars or 4 stars. I'm not really 100% sure like what I decided on. It's a very short like legend, I guess, and it's actually kind of like a local legend because I'm from Westchester, New York, so Sleepy Hollow is also in Westchester, so it's like a fun little thing that like we would always hear as kids, and the town of Sleepy Hollow is not far from the town that I live in, so I've been there multiple times. It's really fun, so it's cool to kind of like see like an origin story of this town. Next, I read The Last Life of Prince Alastor by Alexandra Bracken. This is the second book in the Prosper Redding series duology, so it's the sequel and finale. I read The Dreadful Tale of Prosper Redding 2 years ago, I think. It was 2021, so I've been meaning to get to the sequel for a really long time. I love Alexandra Bracken, and I thought October was the perfect time to dive back into this series. And it was really a fun reading experience because I read the second half of this book while I was doing a day trip in Williamsburg, Virginia, because I go to the University of Richmond, so Williamsburg is like an hour away. So I took a little day trip there and I decided to finish up this book, and it was especially fun because Williamsburg obviously does have a lot of like spooky aspects to it, but Alexandra Bracken actually went to William and Mary, which is in Colonial Williamsburg. So it was just kind of like a fun thing to do while I was visiting the town. But this series follows it's a middle grade series, and it follows a boy named Prosper Redding, and he is a part of this very wealthy family in New England, and he discovers that his ancestor, his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, decided to make a deal with a malefactor, so like a demon sort of spirit, in order to have prosperity and wealth for his family and his descendants. So in present day, Prosper Redding has to deal with this demon prince named Alastor, who has kind of like taken over his body. And it could very easily be a very scary book, but since it's middle grade, it's really fun and funny, and Alastor kind of is always like infiltrating Prosper's mind, and he says really funny things, so definitely works as a middle grade book. And in this book we kind of go into the world that Alastor is from and discover a lot about that. It's definitely a longer book. The first book in the series was under 400 pages, but this one was almost 450, so I think the first book was actually like under 350, so definitely a meatier story, but I really liked spending all this time with the characters and learning more about this world. I thought the characters were really fun. It was nice to revisit them, and I was actually surprised at how much I remembered from the first book, considering I read it like more than 2 years ago. But I really love Alexandra Bracken's writing, and I liked the way that she built this new fantasy world. It was very different than other like kind of demon worlds that I'd read about in other fantasy books, so I enjoyed that aspect, and this is definitely one of the best middle grade series that I've read in recent years, so definitely one that I would recommend, especially during the Halloween time. After that, I was still in a bit of an Alexandra Bracken mood, so I decided to pick up Brightly Woven, which is a graphic novel adaptation of her first novel that actually went out of print. So this is kind of like a comic interpretation of that story. I've never read the original book, so I don't know like how faithful it is, or like how similar it is to the original story. But I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I also gave Last Life of Prince Alastor 4 out of 5 stars. But Brightly Woven was really enjoyable. I thought it was a fun fantasy story, and I actually read it in one sitting. It was really addicting. I loved like the art of it, and it really made me want to read the original book. I don't know how I would get my hands on it because again, it is out of print, but I'll figure it out somehow. I thought it was a really fun story, and it had the signature like Alexandra Bracken world building, really fun characters, and the art in this graphic novel was really top notch. After that, I picked up one of my most anticipated books of the year, which was The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. This is the first book in the Threads of Power series, which is a spin-off of the Shades of Magic series, which is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time, so I thought that this would be a fun book to read. I was reading it while I was on fall break, and my family and I took a trip to Charlottesville, Virginia, so it was really fun, and I got to read this during that little trip, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think this is a very solid continuation of the Shades of Magic story. It picks up 7 years later, but there are chapters throughout the book that kind of go back and explain some of the time that we missed in between A Conjuring of Light and this installment. So I enjoyed that, but I do think that this was very much a setup novel, which was tough because it was like 700 pages long, so it was like just a lot of setup until we got to like probably the last quarter of the book where things were starting to pick up. But I do feel like the first like 3/4 of this book definitely could have been pared down a lot because there was just a lot of introduction to kind of this new world order. We had to like, you know, catch up with the characters from where we last left them. We had to learn a lot about these new characters, and there was just like a lot of politics that we had to reacquaint ourselves with. And I will say that the world in this installment felt a little less vivid than I had remembered. I always loved this fantasy world and like all of the different Londons, and I remember it just being like this super rich, interesting, like immersive fantasy world. And in this book, I don't know if it was just like V.E. Schwab like understanding that we were familiar with the world that she described a little bit less or what, but I just felt like the world was a little watered down in this book. I do think V.E. Schwab did a good job of rewinding at certain points and checking in with the characters within that 7-year time gap between the third book of Shades of Magic and this first book in Threads of Power. And, you know, I liked seeing the backstories of the new characters that we were meeting, and I think the characters themselves were really good. I just do have, like, some issues with the plot and the world not feeling less, like, tactile in a way. But overall, I thought it was, like, a good setup. The pacing wasn't awful, it's just when I look back on the book, I feel like most of it was just laying the groundwork, which I'm usually not the biggest fan of. Like, I like when each installment in a series has its own feel and its own like plot, but I feel like this one was less of its own contained plot and more of a starter of what will be an overarching storyline. But I still give it 4 out of 5 stars. I still enjoyed it, and I am definitely interested in reading the sequel, of course, because I love E. Schwab. I do love this world. I really enjoy these characters. And I have a feeling that like where this book left off will lead into a really exciting middle book in the series. Then continuing on with my adult fantasy reading sprint, I decided to pick up Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in her new epic adult fantasy series that she has been talking about since like 2017. I have been interested in it since she announced it back then, and I was super excited to pick it up. This book follows 2 main characters, and it takes place in this world called Castellane, which is a port city, and it's sort of inspired by, I think she said like Renaissance Venice, but there's also a lot of like Middle Eastern vibes added to it, and the magic system definitely has a kind of Jewish flair I remember her talking about, so that was really interesting. But the first character we follow is Kel, and he is the sword catcher to the prince. So we basically find out in the beginning of the book that since he looks like the crown prince, he has been brought into the palace to kind of be his sidekick and to go into public events and stuff where the prince has a high risk of assassination. So he is essentially like the sword catcher. Like, he will catch any like injuries or assassination attempts that the actual Prince Connor would have, you know, been involved in, if that makes any sense. So he is essentially the body double. He is the one that will be harmed if there are any attacks, and he is the one that will take the fall. And then the other character we follow is named Lynn, and she is a part of the magic-bearing group in this world, and they have been ostracized, and they are not treated well, and all of that. So she essentially, the way she is brought into the story of Kell and Connor and the royal family is because she is brought there as a physician to treat Kell after he is injured from an attempt on Connor's life. So it has the trademark Cassandra Clare web of like different characters. It has her amazing writing, her great world building. I definitely saw a huge increase in like quality of the world building. I think like the reason why the Shadowhunter world is so rich is because we've had like 15 books to establish the various corners of the world, but it took her like, you know, a couple of installments in that series to really build up that like system and order. So I was really impressed by the way that she was able to introduce this world. It felt very rich and detailed, but it also wasn't a ton of like exposition and info dumping at the very beginning. I think it was organized very, very well, and I liked the way that she was world building throughout the story. The characters are also like a shining star of this book. I really loved Kell. I thought he was an interesting main character, and I liked his internal monologue and internal conflict because he kind of doesn't really know who he is outside of Connor. Like, he sleeps in the same room as Connor. He has to act as Connor in multiple scenarios, like almost every single day. And he is like fully integrated into the royal family since he was, you know, a child. So he really has kind of lost the essence of who he himself is. And I thought that was really fascinating. I loved Lynn's perspective and seeing how she views magic and how she views her kind of medical duties. I thought that was really fascinating, and just learning a lot about this world was one of the like highlights of the story. The weakest part of this book for me was definitely the plot. It just felt like kind of similar to the Fractal Threads of Power. It was definitely more of a setup. Like, we spent a lot of time in the first 200 pages establishing the world and establishing the characters, and while I loved that stuff and I thought it rounded out the book in a great way, I was missing the kind of high intensity plots that I'm used to in Cassandra Clare books. But I do have a feeling that the next 3 books in the series will have a lot of that, will kind of break into more of the like meatier parts of the story. And I know Cassandra Clare said that the first 2 books in the series will take place solely in Castellane, but the next 2 after it will show the wider world. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to learn more about the world and spend more time with the characters and definitely be introduced to a stronger plot, because, as I said, a lot of this book was pretty slow, and even though I was enjoying it throughout, I do feel like I was missing the signature Cassandra Clare high-octane storytelling that I'm used to. I will say, though, there were some really interesting plot twists and like character twists throughout the book, and I don't know, I shouldn't have expected anything less, because Cassandra Clare is great at doing those kind of shocking moments in the stories, and she's great at subverting like what we think we know about the characters. There was also like the main romance in the story was definitely very unexpected. I thought it would go like one way between 2 characters, but then it ended up going in the complete opposite direction. But I loved it. I thought it was great, and there were definitely some moments throughout the story where I was like shook. So, you know, overall, great beginning to a fantasy series, and I'm excited to see what she does with the rest of the books. So yeah, overall, 4 to 5 stars, very solid. Next, I picked up A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is the 3rd and final book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, which I have been reading for the last 3 years. I read each book pretty soon after they came out, and I didn't love Once Upon a Broken Heart. I gave it like 2 out of 5 stars, but I really enjoyed The Ballad of Never After. I gave that book 4 stars, and A Curse for True Love I also really enjoyed and gave 4 stars. Actually, I think I settled on a 4.5 star rating for this book. It is definitely my favorite in the series. I just loved the way that she picked up the story that we were beginning at the end of the last book, and I really enjoyed the way she wrapped up the overarching plot. Also, my main issue with the first 2 installments of this series were the characters, but I feel like in this book they really started to come to their own, and I loved Evangeline's arc in this story. I think it was the most solid one across all 3 books. I think she was really stretched as a character and as a person, and I think that made me enjoy her a lot more. She definitely became like her own person, and I understood her motivations a little bit more. The things that Stephanie Garber put her through in this final book were definitely like tough to read about at some points, but I think it was crucial to the development of her character, and just she felt a lot more mature in this book. I think my main issue with Once Upon a Broken Heart was that she just felt very juvenile and silly at certain points, but she definitely became more of an adult in this book, and I felt her really like breaking out of that kind of rose-colored lens shell that she was wearing. It was also really satisfying in this book to step out of Evangeline's perspective, because the first 2 books were told solely from her POV, but we got a few chapters from Jax and Apollo, which were really needed in my opinion. I think it just brought into the scope of the book, and especially like if you know like where Evangeline is in this book, like mentally, it definitely helped to see outside of just her point of view and to get to jump into the heads of 2 other characters that we'd been following throughout the series. Stephanie Garber's writing in this book was also probably the best that I've read from her. I still do love the Carvel series more as a whole than this series, but I will say that the writing that I loved so much in that series came back in this book, and I think was even improved upon. She just has such a way with words, and I think the way that she is able to describe characters and settings and feelings is really impressive, and I always know like how her characters are feeling just because of the way that she is able to explain where they're coming from and their emotions. The plot in this book is also probably the strongest. It's less whimsical than the first 2, and it doesn't have like the kind of quest aspects that the first 2 installments had, but I do think that even though the first half was a little bit slow, it was really interesting, and I liked the way that the world was building alongside the plot, and I think that's something Stephanie Garber really excels in, is kind of as the characters are moving through the story, the world is also like expanding around them. But the darker themes in this book I definitely think were important to this step that we are in the Carnival world, and I definitely applaud Stephanie Garber for like going there at some points. My main complaint with the story, and the reason why I didn't get 5 stars, is because I do think it was rushed at certain points, and I also feel like the ending was definitely like a little bit of a cop-out. Like, I was just kind of disappointed at the ending, and I was just like, oh, that's it. Like, after the big showdown at the end, there was like 1 chapter that kind of just wrapped everything up, and I was like, okay, like, I guess that's where you want to end the story, but I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more at the end. So yeah, overall though, I did really love this book. I am really satisfied with the series as a whole, even though the ending was a little bit like cheap in my opinion. It just felt like a very easy ending to give the characters when they had worked through so much in this last beat of the story, if you will. Overall though, very solid series. 4.5 for this installment, and I think a good addition to the Caraval world. Also, can we just talk about these covers, because I have the UK editions for each of these books, and they all have this beautiful artwork under the dust jacket. I got the wolf for this. The spine is also gorgeous, and I love the map in this series, like, because each book has like a different map, and the cover is also really beautiful, and the back I love. May the best villain win. That's really cool. So yeah, A+ to Hodder and Stoughton publishers, the UK editions. I don't love the US versions of these covers, so that's why I have the UK ones, but man, the UK really knows what they're doing, I have to say. Okay, now I have to talk about a book that I didn't really like, and I just accidentally showed the cover, so there goes that mystery, but that is All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater. I have read 5 Maggie Stiefvater books now. I read The Raven Cycle, which I enjoyed. It's over there, actually, like the first book on that 4th shelf. And I enjoyed that series. It was a little bit like rocky for me throughout, but I ended up really enjoying it in the end. And the last 2 books, man, that made me a stan of that series. The first 2 were kind of like, okay, like, I don't really understand the hype, but Blue Lily Lily Blue and The Raven King had me shook, I have to say. And I've had All the Crooked Saints. Whoa, it just got really bright in this room. I have had All the Crooked Saints for a couple of years now, I think, and it is one that I've just been wanting to read because I haven't really heard a lot of this book, and I actually enjoy that. I like hearing less about a book when I'm about to go into it because I'm able to form my own opinions and not be influenced by like hype or even bad reviews sometimes. So I knew this was like a fairy tale-esque magical realism story that takes place in Colorado in the 50s with this family who can perform miracles. And that's literally all this story is. Like, there's no real plot. It's kind of just Maggie Stiefvater flexing her writing skills. And I will say, like, yeah, her writing's beautiful. Like, I was engaged in that sense. Like, while I was reading, I was able to enjoy her prose, and I was able to kind of sink into the setting and certain scenes, but I think sometimes it's also just like a detriment to her stories because that's all she kind of cares about, is creating a beautiful sentence. And while she can do it, and while I applaud her for having that innate writing skill, it does like bog down the story a lot, and I think if her writing was less flowery and descriptive, this book would have been like 100 pages long because there really is no plot. And I've read a lot of books that don't have like a super shocking plot, like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It doesn't have like a super shocking, intense plot. It's mostly just about the writing, and like, what else? There's a ton of books that are like that. Even Strange the Dreamer, like, doesn't have a super crazy plot. Like, yeah, it's there, but the writing is honestly, like, takes the forefront of the story as well. But it's just, like, there's other stuff to back it up. Like, I don't think you can just rely on pretty writing to, you know, get you where you want to go. I do know that there are some criticisms of this book about Maggie Stiefvater writing magical realism and like Latinx characters and stories. I don't have like a strong opinion on this because I don't feel like I deserve to have a strong opinion on this because I'm not an Own Voices reviewer, so I would definitely recommend checking out some Own Voices reviews to kind of get a better idea of these criticisms, but I did just want to mention them. I will be talking about this book in my like least favorite books of 2023 video, so I have marked a section in this book that I just want to read to everyone watching that video how I feel about the book, or like to express like what I mean about the writing. I don't want to read it right now because this video is already very long and it's a long paragraph. So yeah, overall I give it 2 stars. It was, like, there was just, like, nothing really gripping me. Like, I was kind of just reading the book to read the book, and I will give credit to Maggie Stiefvater. She's a great writer, but there's just, I need interesting characters, and I need an interesting plot to care about a story. Like, this was just felt like kind of, it felt like a creative writing assignment, in my opinion, instead of a book. So, I digress. And then the last book that I read in October was Pumpkinheads by Rowell, illustrated by Erin Hicks, and this is a graphic novel that I like to read every Halloween because it's just a fun story to read. It takes place at this pumpkin patch, and we follow two main characters, Josiah and Deja, and it is their last year working at the pumpkin patch, and they each kind of have their own missions to go on. This is a really cute story that, I don't know, I just like to revisit every year. It's cute, it's fun, it's light, it's quick. It's just, the art is really beautiful as well, and the plot is just super engaging, and like you can read it in one sitting. So, yeah. I don't really have much else to say. 4 out of 5 stars, I guess. And then I'm going to be talking about every single book that I read in November at once because it was a reread of one series that I reread every year, and that is the Shatter Me series by Tahereh and Mafi. I have talked about these books so many times, but I read these like 6 main books, and then Believe Me is part of 5 novellas that go along with the series, so in total I read 11 books in November, and I will kind of talk about each book individually, I guess. One day I am going to do like a individual reading vlog / review for each book in this series, just because it deserves it. I read it every single year, and I don't have dedicated reviews on my channel, which I feel like is a crime. So the first book is Shatter Me. I'm not really going to talk about the plot of this series because it's super popular and I've talked about it multiple times on my channel, but Shatter Me, this first book, still 4 out of 5 stars, very solid. It's good. Then Destroy Me, which is the novella in between Shatter Me and Unravel Me, is my favorite novella in the series. I love getting to see inside Warner's perspective in between these 2 books. Unravel Me is the second book and my favorite in the series. I love the progression of the characters. I think they have the biggest arcs in this second book, and it's also the longest in the series, so there's the most like meat in the story, which I love, and this is obviously 5 out of 5 stars. Then Fracture Me is the novella that comes between the second and third books. Solid as well, 4 stars. Interesting to see from Adam's POV. The third book, Ignite Me, is 5 stars from me as well. I think it's a great finale for like the middle of the series. And again, I love the progression of the characters, super solid. The fourth book, in the beginning of like the second arc of the series, is Restore Me, 5 stars for this one as well. It's like super juicy, like there's not much of a plot in this installment, but I love getting to see, like, pick up the characters again and see like some new characters as well. Really fun. Then Shadow Me. This is like an okay novella, I think. It's like fine. It's from Kenji's POV, solid, 3, 4 out of 5 stars. I have never really decided. Then Defy Me, the 5th book in the series, is my least favorite, 3 out of 5 stars. I have a full Goodreads review that you can read. It's way more eloquent than what I could say in like the next couple of minutes, so meh. Then Reveal Me. This is a really solid one. I love the ending of this novella, 4 out of 5 stars. And then we have Imagine Me, which is definitely one of my favorite books in the series. I think it's great. And then the last installment in the series, Believe Me, which is the like last novella. It's okay, 3 out of 5 stars. I feel very lukewarm about it. So if I had to rank the series, I would definitely say my favorite book, I'll rank like the books and then the novellas. My favorite book is Unravel Me, then probably I would say Ignite Me, then Imagine Me, then Restore Me, Shatter Me, and Defy Me is my least favorite. So from best to worst, this is the order, and then for the novellas, my favorite is Destroy Me, then Fracture Me, Reveal Me, then I guess Believe Me, and then Shadow Me. That seems like a good ranking. But no matter how many times I read this series, I still love it. I still love the characters, and I just think it's great. And one day I will do those reading vlogs / reviews. But that is finally the end of this video. I would love to know the books that you all read in October and November. I would also love to know your thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned, if you agree, if you disagree, all that fun stuff. But yeah, that is the end. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All of my social media links are in the description box below. and I will see you soon for a new video. Bye!